Hey everybody, it's so good to continue today's writing summit with you. We are so excited that we have Anne Dayleview here. Say hi,
Hi.
Anne. uh, so I will just do a quick intro of Anne, and then I will quickly exit and let her just share some great information with you. So Anne writes fantasy novels with aim to transport the reader to worlds unlike any other. So she reads any young adult and middle grade fantasy novel she can get her hands on. Her writing is often inspired by the wild assortment of music she listens to. You got to ask her a question about that. Everything from classical to pop and beyond. So, in addition to writing, Anne loves spending time with her two dogs. Just found out that she's fosters dogs, so we might hear a new one coming in. She bakes all the sweet things and she brings awareness to mental health issues. Awesome. So Anne lives in Pennsylvania with her ever rotating collection of books that she lugs around from place to place. Awesome. It's so great to have you here, Anne. We are thrilled and excited and can't wait to learn from you. So I will just get out of your hair and let you present.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, today I want to talk about world building, and I know we had a little bit of a presentation on it earlier, but this one is really going to focus on the world itself and really breathing life into it. And that doesn't just mean in fantasy worlds, but also in worlds that are based off of a contemporary setting or a historical setting. So you can use this and apply it to any sort of genre you're writing. All right, just a little bit more about me. As Michelle mentioned, I'm a young adult fantasy writer, and my book, A Tale of Ashes, is all about a teen journalist solving a case of disappearances in a world where humans and fae live side by side. So I'm really going to dive into the differences and the clashes between the different worlds and really understand how to make that world come to life and become a character itself. So what is world building? And I have a little bit of an interactive segment too. So Michelle, if you don't mind moderating this a little bit, I'm just going to go through a little bit of an interactive bit at the end. But for this purpose, I'm going to answer these questions for you. So world building is the process of constructing an imaginary world, sometimes associated with a whole fictional universe. Now, when it says imaginary world, that's a world that just comes from your head. It doesn't have to be fantasy. So say you're writing a book that takes place in the Revolutionary world. That can really be anything from, you can take it and set it in Historical Valley Forge and build upon that, what that world looks like as you imagine it through your character's eyes, even if your character is a real person. So I just want to ask, what are your favorite worlds? And you can answer in the chat and we can review them later. So some of my favorite worlds, I love the worlds in the Magic Treehouse series. Those were some of my favorites growing up as a kid. I also love the world of Harry Potter. I think it's just become so iconic and such a character in itself. And then I also love creating worlds itself. As I mentioned before, the world in A Tale of Ashes is a contemporary setting, but it blends in magic so that those two come alive and intertwine with each other in such a cool way. So let's dive a little bit into how you build a world in itself. So there's different types of ways that you build a world and that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at world building and when you're looking at different types of worlds. So starting off, we're talking about every type of world. You need to decide what kind of background you want it to have. So do you want it to be a magical world where you're building a fantasy and you have different types of magic, different creatures? That's one type of world you can build. Or you can have a science fiction world where you have aliens and spacecrafts and different types of planets. Or you can do neither. And you can have a world that's based off of history, or a world that's based off of a town that you're familiar with or completely unfamiliar with. Or you can blend all of them together. It doesn't have to be anything specific, but it's all up to you as into how you want to choose the type of world you're setting in. And then you have to set the rules of this world. Especially in fantasy, this is so important because you can make characters do pretty much anything. They can fly, they can shoot lasers out of their eyes, they can cast magic spells. So in fantasy, it's super important to have these rules. But that doesn't mean that rules are limited just to that specific genre. So for example, you could also have rules in a contemporary setting. So those types of rules could be the laws that the government creates, or the societal pressures that the local town imposes on people. So if you're thinking about a story where, a picture book even, where you're having a child and they want to build cookies or bake cookies with their mom, but maybe one of those rules is that their mom doesn't allow them to use the oven on their own, and they have to figure out a way to convince their mom to bake cookies. That's another way that you can impose rules that go beyond just the fantasy genre, or even that go beyond some of the higher age categories. So when you're creating a world, you need to really make sure that you're seeing it, one, through the character's eyes, and put limitations that are realistic to what those characters are. And then the final thing that you really need to keep in mind is the culture. And every single world, whether you're thinking of a short picture book or you're thinking of a long fantasy novel, and everything in between, needs to have a specific culture that you're associating with that world. And it doesn't necessarily have to be based off of real life cultures. This extends to everything between traditions. So if it's a type of contemporary novel where it's a town that always has a bacon festival every year, that's something that's a tradition that you can weave into your novel and really make that a part and bring that world to life. Or it could be something that involves the food. So this can be something like in a fantasy world, maybe, or a sci-fi world, where maybe they have magic bubbles or special drinks that they drink that have special powers. So maybe they have, like in Alice in Wonderland, when she drinks that magic potion that makes her shrink or makes her grow. Those are things that you can incorporate into your world that show off the different culture. You also could have different customs, different ways of dress. All of those things contribute to the world building and contribute to how you're building this culture and society. So when you're thinking about putting together this fictional world, make sure you keep in mind the different types, the rules, and the culture as you're building it. So this one I think is really important to keep in mind, where you're thinking about how worlds change over time. And I think this could be a little surprising when you're talking about some of the shorter fiction, if you're writing a short story, or if you're writing a picture book, or even if you're writing something longer like a young adult novel. Worlds still change over time, and that's because characters change. Their viewpoint in the world changes. So that's what you have to keep in mind as you're building out a story. And we're going to walk through the different steps that a world takes as it's changing, and the different things that you have to keep in mind as it's changing. So there are really three parts of every story. You have your beginning, your middle, and your end. And that's the same for the fictional worlds that you're building. So at the start of the story, it's really told from your character's point of view. How do they view the world? When you're looking at the world from the character's point of view, what is it like? Is it this bright, happy place where everything is going well? Or maybe it's a darker place where they just need a ray of hope to come into their lives. And that's the kind of world that they're seeing. And this can apply to even historical fiction, if that's something you're writing. That could be a world where maybe it's based off of historical Mali, and you have these kingdoms, and you have someone growing up in one of these kingdoms where through their eyes they have tons of servants and they have tons of people that are working for them, like their guards and their royalty. And then everything changes as you move into the middle. So maybe this person goes on a journey to follow the trade routes, for example. And that's how the world kind of changes, even as they're leaving their home, as they're leaving that place where they've known, where everything they've known is going away. And what does that world look like now? What is that new part of their existence becoming? I think this is extremely important because a lot of times when you're writing and you get to that middle part of the story, it tends to fall flat because you have all of this excitement at the beginning and you know how it ends, so you want to rush through the middle. But especially when building a world, you have to keep in mind how that character views the world from the middle, and that has to be just as exciting, if not more so, than the beginning and the end. Because if your middle isn't exciting, people aren't going to make it to the end of that story. So how can you capture them within that world to really make it an exciting part of your story? So some of the things that I like to think about when I'm building the middle of the story and how I'm looking at the world through the middle is really taking into account any changes. So what is different between the beginning of the story, where the world is in a certain situation, and how is that changing from the middle? So, for example, in a murder mystery story, you have this world that is maybe a small town where everyone gets along, or maybe they don't get along, but nothing really dangerous happens and they think it's a very safe place. But once someone gets murdered, then that really changes their outlook and that changes how they view that world. Suddenly, this really cheerful small town where everything is safe is not so safe anymore. And that's going to change how that character looks at the world and how that world changes around them, how it's dimmed a little bit. And then the opposite can be true for a darker story, or even a story where the character is not as happy at the beginning. So maybe it's a story about a little girl who's afraid of everything, and she's sad because she can't do the fun things that her friends are doing because she's so scared. Maybe something happens in the middle where she gets a magic teddy bear, and that teddy bear starts to show her the fun and takes away her fear. That's a good idea of how that story changes, even in a shorter story like a picture book, in the middle. Then we get into the end of the story, where that world once again changes and looks a little bit different than it had in the beginning and in the middle. So that change is going to be key as you're getting into the end of that story. How has the character really changed their viewpoint from the beginning to the end? And it usually looks like the opposite, but actually it comes full circle. And I know that sounds a little bit backwards from what I just said, but I'm going to go a little bit into that. So at the end of so if we take the example of the little girl who's afraid of everything, at the start of the story, she's afraid of everything. At the end of the story, you want her to be in a situation where she is not as afraid as she was before. She's learned to conquer some of those fears, but we have to take it back to what was stopping her before and what that end part looks like and what her eventual goal was at the beginning. And that's going to show how the world has either brightened or dimmed. So at the end of the start of the story was very dark. There wasn't a whole lot of hope for her because she was so scared of everything. But at the end, it's a lot lighter. She's still in the same town. She's still with the same friends, but her world looks different because it's gotten brighter and it's changed from the way she initially viewed it. So starting through this whole transition, you want to make sure that you're using those elements of change to build on your world and to make it different at each stage of your book. Now, those worlds change in a cycle, and that's kind of what I was talking about in the end. And I think this is a really great opportunity to really look at your novel and re-examine, does your world change enough throughout the story? So at the beginning, you have that changing world, the world where the character is, or I'm sorry, you have the normal world, the world where the character is experiencing life the way they always do. And for the character, you want to make sure that this world is stable in their mind, that they don't think that there's really much of an opportunity to escape the world that they know. Even if they do see, even if there's a change of event coming in the future, their outlook on the world is going to stay the same. Then an event will happen that will show them this changing world. So, for example, say you have a character at the beginning of the story who sees the world as a boring place, it's humdrum, and there's nothing that really happens or changes, but they're planning a trip to go away to a foreign place where they think things are going to be so different from their everyday life. So at the same time where they think something's going to be different in this foreign place, their outlook on their current world hasn't changed. That's something that's going to remain consistent throughout the story, where they're thinking, okay, this is my Hodrum life, but if I go here, it's going to be changed completely. And we'll get to how that Hodrum life at the beginning is going to be different at the end of the story. So once they start going to this new place, that's where you move into the changing world. This is where they get the new experiences, and they constantly are comparing it to their old life. Maybe these new experiences are great and exciting, or maybe they're scary and they're not sure how to adapt to it. And so they're comparing it to, well, my old world was a lot safer than this new world. Or maybe they're thinking that this is the world that they want to live in now, and this is how things should be going forward. And then from there, the character starts to accept how this world has changed and how they're living in this brave new world. So in the brave new world, it's creating almost a sense of normalcy that we saw the complete opposite of what we're having in the beginning. So that is a whole system of everything has already changed for that character. And the character is living in this world where they've accepted the changes. So these changes could be anything from this character, once they've experienced all of the really cool and new things in this foreign world, maybe they've come to a spot where they're starting to see a different part of the story as being more important. The plot's coming out and they're ready to face the villain. And the new changes in this world aren't as major and aren't as big of a plot point as the world had been previously. But as they defeat the villain and move through and past that climax of the story, they return to that new normal. And that new normal is the foil of the normal world at the beginning. So say that character has returned home. Their outlook on their Hodrum life has completely changed. And they're not going to view their world the same way after having that amazing adventure. They're going to see their world in a different way, whether it's a darker place after having a terrifying adventure, or maybe it's a brighter place after seeing that terrifying adventure, or fun adventure, where they can find adventure in their everyday life. So following this cycle is really going to keep your story strong by treating your world like its own character. So let's dive into an example of what that cycle looks like. So we have the normal world. And for this example, I'm going to use Harry Potter. So here we are on Privet Drive. Harry Potter lives under a staircase. His parents are gone. He lives in this miserable situation with his aunt and uncle and spoiled cousin. And he's absolutely sad because nobody treats him well. He's neglected. Nobody really cares much about him. And this is what his life looks like. This is his normal world. And then we have Hagrid come in. And Hagrid starts to change his world. Hagrid shows him that there's this whole magical world out there, and he's a part of it. And so Harry is in a situation where he's taken from his humdrum life, from the misery that he's learned to live with his entire life, to this magical place where anything is possible and where he's actually treated as a hero and he's treated with all of the love and admiration that he's never had before. So the world around him not only has changed from being this sad, dismal place, but it's also changed from being this place that is very familiar to us as a reader, to this whole magical world where things are completely different, and the author is showing us this whole magical world. And this can be applied to really any genre. It doesn't just have to be a magical world. The author just has to change the way the character's viewpoint is. So here we have the Brave New World. And this brave new world is when Harry gets to Hogwarts and he starts taking his classes and he meets new friends. So he's in a situation where he's loved and everyone cares about him, and there's magic, and he's learning about all of these creatures and the history of this world. And he's starting to pick up on some things that might not necessarily be normal in this brave new world he's discovered. So he's discovering that some of his teachers aren't that nice, and he's not liking them, even though he's been in a situation where everyone was not nice to him. But since he's starting to adapt and accept his new reality, that not nice to him is standing out now. He's starting to notice a mystery where some people are becoming suspicious for him, and he wants to explore that and understand more about that. So this is where the plot really takes over from the world, and the world kind of falls to the background as something that has been accepted by the main character and is something that the main character that is not as strong, but is still part of that main character's life and needs to come through. And then we have Harry's new normal. So he's casting spells now. He has his great friends, but he's also returning back to Privet Drive. But he has a different outlook on life. He's no longer that miserable kid who sleeps under the stairs and has that dreary outlook on life. He's a lot more confident now. He knows that there's a place where people love him and care about him, and he knows those are possibilities now. So I'm not sure if you have read the second book, but after Harry comes back from the first book, he gets a bedroom of his own. He's no longer forced to be under the stairs because he has the confidence to really request that and make sure that his aunt and uncle provide that care for him. They're not providing the best care for him, but they're still providing a good source of care where he's loved and accepted. All right. So, Michelle, I don't know if you mind coming back, but I wanted to do this interactive experiment together so that we can build our own world.
Ooh, I am so excited for this. Let me just get out of here so we don't have any echo. Okay, great. While we are doing that, I just wanted to put some of the notes up. So you were asking about World building. So Luke was saying he enjoys historical worlds, especially early to mid-American settings.
Awesome. Yeah, you can definitely use some of these skills to build that out.
Absolutely. And I think I saw Narnia in there somewhere, which I second. And then Alice in Wonderland. So, yep, you've had some folks definitely participating.
Awesome.
Okay, so what can I be a part of?
Okay, so we're going to start building our own world. So asking the people in the comments, what type of world do we want to start with? And this goes back to our 3 pillars, looking at our type of world. Any type of world we can start with, and then we'll start talking about it through the cycle.
Okay, so you can put it in the chat. What type of world do you want?
We can start with, and then we'll start.
I'm gonna take off here, and then I'm gonna try to watch it so I can read the chat. So let me see. Putting in the chat. See some of the comments. So, Anne, can you give an example of one place that they can start?
Sure. So we can start with a small town in Guatemala where the main character views the world brightly, or we could start with a magical world where the main character, magical city where the main character views the world as dark and grisly, and there's not really a place for them in that world.
Okay.
Anything along those lines.
I see Sherry said, let's start with a magical world for children.
Okay.
How about we start in an ice cream cone?
Oh, starting in a magical world where there's in the middle of an ice cream
They're
cone.
in the middle of an ice cream cone, yes.
And how does the main character view that world? Is the ice cream world a fun place, or is it a scary place? Is it a happy place?
It's actually scary because they're not sure if there's an out. So they're at the bottom of the cone. So they see something that's packed. So it's a vanilla ice cream. So on top of them, it's packed. And they're like, can I swim my way out of this to see if there's something else out there? So they're maybe not so much scary as they're curious as to what's beyond the white foam.
That's amazing. So that curious nature is really going to start with our new normal. Maybe that character is interacting with other people who aren't curious, other people who just accept that white foam as part of their life. And maybe that character has the ability to explore outside that white foam. So that's really what we want to start with our new normal. That's the kind of. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I see. Ruth says that it could be fun at first, but then later scary.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it could be where the main character loves living in the ice cream cone, loves the sweetness of it, and then they want to see that changing part that we had spoken about. So the world would be changing, and that ice cream cone might start to get a little scary. So we'll move into the next part where we're making the rules of the ice cream cone. What are the limitations that character has? Can they fly out of the ice cream cone? Do they have to swim and they can breathe through the vanilla? Or maybe they feel really cold, but they can still survive through the ice cream. What are those rules that the character has? What are their abilities that they have?
Oh, that's a really good one. What are some of their abilities? So Sherry said melting, and it kind of got me thinking, could their body heat be a way that they dig their way out because they can melt with their body heat, but they don't know that they can?
Ooh, so they can change their body heat. I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then Ruth said, what is the character? Like, is it a person? I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe it's a sprinkle.
Ooh, a sprinkle. Good one. I like it. A sprinkle with special lungs. I get.
Sprinkle with
Like,
special lungs and the ability to change their body temperature.
I love it. I love it.
So as we move through that middle part of that story, that character's viewpoint of that ice cream cone is going to change. So maybe the ice cream cone is melting and the character wants to get to the top so that they can save the other sprinkles. Or maybe they have to find a way to stop the ice cream cone from melting, and changing their body heat is the only way that they can get through that ice cream. So as they're getting through that ice cream cone, maybe that's where we start to see their world changing a bit. And that's when we have to implement the different cultures and the different thoughts and ideas. And maybe those are what's changing in the character's head as we get to the middle.
Awesome. Great. And Cherry says, I love sprinkles. When they move, they generate body heat, and the melting allows them to rise. Oh, that's good. Yep.
Ooh, yep. So what does the culture of these sprinkles look like? What does the sprinkle believe? What are their core beliefs that guide them to find this other solution?
Ooh, that is so good. What do you guys think? What do they believe? I don't think I've ever considered the belief system of a sprinkle, but now I'm not going to think about anything else. Well, if we're talking about them wanting to go and help the other sprinkles, so they obviously have a sense of justice. Mm-hmm. That's good. I see Ruth says that some sprinkles don't want to move to the top. They're satisfied where they are. They have always been in the ice cream cone, so why leave? Ooh, I love this. Oh yeah, we're definitely looking at the depth of the sprinkles.
Yeah. What about what the sprinkles, like, how they interact with each other? Do they have fun greetings? Are there other creatures in the ice cream cone? Like maybe there's hot fudge that sometimes comes down to visit them, or nuts that come visit them. Maybe there's like a whiff of whipped cream, or maybe the whipped cream's on top and they've heard rumors of it and they're scared.
Jen said, step out of your comfort zone, Sprinkles.
Yeah, come on, Sprinkles.
Jen says they have a special language. And then the Ruth says that the marshmallows come to visit.
That's a good one.
And then Sherry said there are differences in the world, places outside the ice cream where other sprinkles are living a different life. Oh, I didn't imagine.
Wow, that's a good one.
Oh, good. And she said that some sprinkles prefer being on cupcakes rather than ice cream. Also, we have.
So this world is really growing.
I know.
See how wonderful it is when you get inspired and you're following this trend? So maybe the sprinkle makes its way to the top, gets past the whipped cream, and sees all of the other possibilities in this world. Maybe they're in like a tub of birthday cake ice cream, and they're in a bakery and they can see the other sprinkles living on the cupcakes, and they can see sprinkles living on donuts.
And there's cookies too.
On cookies, right? And they want to connect with all of them. And that's the main rising point in the plot, where the sprinkle is trying to get to all of these other sprinkles and connect with them and learn about the different cultures. And that's their big adventure.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Oh my goodness, guys, we're building worlds. We're building worlds.
This is awesome. And then once the sprinkle has really gained this perspective of all these different cultures and all the beliefs of all the other sprinkles, they're going to take that back to their other sprinkles within the ice cream cone, or the ice cream cone, and that's where they're going to start sharing that information they've learned, and their whole outlook on the ice cream cone is going to be different because they've experienced that culture. They're no longer going to be looking at the ice cream cone as a scary place where, you know, it's scary to move outside of it. They're going to spread that and really look at that ice cream cone as that's the place where they live and the culture that they're comfortable with. But there's a whole great place outside of it, and they don't have to be afraid of that anymore.
That's absolutely right. And other Anne said they found their sprinkle tribe. That's great. I love it.
Yes.
And Jen said, did we plan this in advance? And now she wants sprinkles.
I know. I'm thinking of an ice cream cone now. I know I'm supposed to get opera cake later, so I'm really looking forward to that.
I know, ice cream it is later.
So that was
go ahead.
amazing. Oh, I was just going to say, that was amazing. We really created that world, and we went through the entire cycle while following the rules and following the beginning, middle, and end of that whole story. And we did it all with sprinkles.
Awesome. And Sherry says that she loves this activity. It's a wonderful way to add another layer to your stories. So great job.
Thank you. I really wanted to make sure that everyone could understand it and really have an applicable way of applying this cycle so that they can really bring their worlds to life.
Absolutely. And I think we can definitely take away from your presentation and apply it to our stories. So awesome.
So we can fill out this slide later, but this is going to be for you guys to fill this out for your own worlds, where you're thinking of plotting it out and really how you can incorporate these questions into your worlds as you're building them out.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. Leave it open for questions.
Cool. Great. So I'm going back to pull some of the ones that were coming up. So Jen asked, do you outline world changes outside of regular plot points?
I do. And I use a really great tool called Milanote, and I just started using it, but I really
Say that
like
again. It's Milla, M-I-L-L-A?
M-I-L-A.
L-A.
Milanote.
Milanote.
Yep.
Okay, great.
And it's really great because you can do a whole bunch of things in there. But one of the things that I really like is that you can plot really well in there, and you can color code. So you can change you can plot your world alongside your plot and have your plot at the top. And so you put your plot in red, and then you put the changes in your world in red. And that really intertwines with how your plot is laid out. And it really helps you make sure that you're keeping your world as well as your characters kind of in that line and in that cycle. So you can really make sure those pop. Oh, you color code your plot, Jen? That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yes, definitely look at your worlds because that makes them pop.
Okay, so Luke is asking, what are your thoughts about starting out where the character likes their current world, but then something happens that radically changes the situation?
I think those are awesome types where the character likes their world, and that's similar actually to what I have in A Tale of Ashes, where the character likes their world and something radically happens to change their situation where they have a bunch of disappearances. So I think that's a really great way to start your world, as long as you have those changes and you really focus on moving through the cycle. That's going to really help bring that world to life.
Okay, and then Ruth is asking, do you have any pictures in your sci-fi books?
So my book is actually a contemporary fantasy, so it's not sci-fi, but I don't have any pictures. I just have the cover that I absolutely love.
Beautiful cover. Yeah, absolutely.
But sometimes I will draw pictures, and one of the cool things about Milanote actually is that you can create an inspiration board. So you can pull in pictures, and they have a little extension where if you see a picture that you like, you can just click it and add it to your inspiration board. So when you're looking at plotting and building your world and building your character arcs, you have that all in one place. And it'll sometimes even ask you the questions for you and lay it out for you. So it's really great. It's designed for creative people, but it has templates specifically for writers, which is really helpful.
Nice. Definitely going to
and
check
they're not
it out.
paying me for this.
They should be.
Right?
Jen wanted you to talk a little bit about your picture cards. She said that you did picture character cards or
I
charts.
did. I actually had some around here. Where?
And she was saying it's your picture cards that helped her experience her characters.
Oh. So here is one that I put on my bookmark. You can see that.
Ah, yes. Can we see? Yep.
So one of the things that I really like when I'm reading books is when I have the little visuals for characters. And I know a lot of authors in the YA space do these character cards so that readers can have something that they can hold on to that expresses the character, has a little bit of that character's personality with it in the border. And so that's something that I really wanted to have for my book. So I contracted an artist to do that, and she did an amazing job. So if you go to my Instagram, which is @Dayleview, you can actually see the post where I have my character card, and then I have a little character profile next to it. So for one of the characters, my main character, Freddie, she loves waffles. And that's kind of a reoccurring thing throughout the book. So in her border, I had waffles that went around the sides of it.
That's pretty awesome.
So I really love bringing those characters to life in that way.
Cool. And then I'm just going to put your Instagram on here so folks can see it. You can check her out. She has a really great feed.
Thank you.
So wanted to know, how was it to match up your fae to your current world?
I found it pretty seamless because I think the way that fae are incorporated into our world is very similar to how we treat refugees, and having them as people and individuals rather than having them as just those magical creatures was a way that I tried to make it different and tried to make it stand out from some of the other books where fae were either these over-sexualized beings or they were other from the actual humans in the book. And I really wanted to show that these are people and they are just like the humans in the book, and they do want to be included in that.
Yeah, and you did that. It came across wonderfully. So I saw Ruth was saying that she loved it. Where did I see that before? I just wanted to highlight that.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. And Jen is saying that she loves how you incorporated it all.
Yes, I think humanizing your characters, which is a whole different conversation, is so important to writing any sort of book, whether it's fantasy or contemporary or historical, making sure your characters have an element of realism and your readers can live and breathe your characters just how they can live and breathe your world.
And that's actually a good question that I had. I know that sometimes you can get so lost in creating the world that you forget, especially in magical realism, that you forget that there is a character there that you need to give a personality that's still kind of human, that a human being can feel like they connect with. So can you give some tips to writers, especially beginning writers? How do you make sure that you don't create a world that's so fantastical that you don't connect with just the humans on the other side of it?
Yeah, so I would always say start with your characters. And it's all about how your characters view the world and not about how the world is incorporated into your characters. So yes, the world will have impact on how the characters live their lives, but you need to tell that from the character's perspective. One of the books that I think has amazing world building is called The Clady Journals. I actually have it here on my shelf, and I absolutely love it. But
it's the Clady Journals?
Yeah.
Can you just spell that so I make sure that I put it as a resource for folks in the chat?
CLADI.
It's DI, not Y. Okay, great. All right.
And
Absolutely.
it has worlds with weird little spaceships and science and magic. I'm not sure if it's magic or science, but it really blends things together, and it has clockwork, and there's all sorts of cool things that impact the world, but it's told through the main character Clady's point of view. And at the beginning, she sees her world as a very isolated, dark place. She's not happy where she is. And then something changes it, and she's thrown into this crazy adventure. And the world is scary and exciting and amazing and magical for her. But there's so many elements to the world, but the author maintains that it's through the character's perspective, and the character's emotions are put into that world. So start with your characters as your world building, and then move into your world, and then show, like, if this character is sad, what's making them sad? If this character is feeling like an outcast, what's making them an outcast? What elements of the world are making them that way?
I think that's very helpful advice. Just have a couple of minutes. I wanted to hear from you. What was your favorite part about building the world in A Tale of Ashes?
I think what, at least my favorite part that really got me fired up, was really making sure that this world included some of my passions. I really do feel like the immigrant experience is so important and so often overlooked. I think a lot of times people hear about refugees in the news and they don't really think about how important that issue is, and they don't really see them as human, and they don't really have that connection to them where they can say, okay, this is a refugee. This isn't just an immigrant who's coming to this country. This is someone who's desperate and needs help and needs to come to this country because their home isn't safe, or because they don't have resources to feed their families. And that's so important to me, and I really wanted to show it through this book, because I think it's something that's that people are easily desensitized to.
Yeah, and I read it and I just saw how clearly you brought out the compassion in a way that felt very comfortable. You could just kind of, it just made you stop and you were like, oh, I can see the thread between what's happening here and maybe something, like you said, you've been desensitized to it, that you don't really notice it every day as much as you should. So I loved it for that.
Yeah, I think things like that are not necessarily political issues, but they're more human issues.
Absolutely. And Jen said, I love all the tips and teaching. She took tons of notes. And Sherry says she loves your worldview, and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Any last words for us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, just make sure, follow the steps while you're building your world, and really make sure you find ways to bring it to life. The world is just as important as your characters.
Fabulous. And how can people connect with you, support you?
Yeah, so you can find my book, A Tale of Ashes, really wherever books are sold. If you're in the Pennsylvania area, you can go into all of the Barnes and Noble, or at least the Philly, Pennsylvania area. All of the Barnes and Nobles from Exton, Devon, North Wales to Neshaminy, they all carry my book. Anywhere in Virginia too, Fairfax, Richmond, and anywhere, Clarendon in between, you can find my book in stores. You can find it online. There's some indie bookstores that carry it. So really, wherever books are sold, you can get my book.
Okay, you hear that, guys? I have my copy and I absolutely love it. So A Tale of Ashes by Anne Dayleview. And thank you, Anne, for helping us build worlds.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in the next session.
Bye.
Bye.